Yeah, this should be good. Let me close a couple of windows and we'll get going. Hey, Eric. Oh, it does repeat? You're not getting an echo, are you? Oh, okay, good. All right. Tonight, Lord willing, I was just mentioning to Eric, we'll take a look at the money aspect of the gospel, and a couple of things that I noted. I think it's really interesting, and Lord willing, you might find the study. Uh, you might also find it interesting. Let's start. Let me post the heading. Just bear with me 1 second. Is it surprising to see that the word money is always talking about Christ? Isn't that interesting? That money is also relating to Christ, but more specifically, the redeeming power of the gospel. The redeeming power of the gospel. So that's what I thought was, and again, it's not, I'm sorry, it's not, I don't think it's surprising because that's pretty much what we've been looking at, right? We're looking for the gospel. Genesis 17, verse 13, he that is born in thy house and he that is bought with thy money must needs be circumcised, and my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. Money, here's another verse, Genesis 17, verse 23. And Abraham is a type of God here, I believe. And the name Abraham is father of a multitude. Abraham took Ishmael his son and all that were born in his house and all that were born with his money. With his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house. So we know that circumcision is typifying salvation. So Abraham buying with money. Okay, those that are redeemed, they're circumcised. They are bought with Christ. They are bought with Christ, but not buying in a sense of an exchange just like that. And then I'll see if I can explain that. In verse 9 of Genesis 23, that he may give me, that's Abraham, the cave of Machpelah, which means double or portion, which he hath, which is in the end of his field, for as much money as it is worth, he shall give it me for a possession of a burying place amongst you. Now Abraham bought this field to bury Sarah, his wife. And I think there we're looking at a type of Christ who buys the field. And burial, given the context, has to do with what? Salvation, right? So the burial of Sarah with a field that was bought with money, with the price of blood, the blood of Christ. Now this topic here, I must say, it's not an easy topic. It's not an easy area, although on the surface it might appear to be. It's a little bit complex, and hopefully not too complex. And I'll offer some verses and try to get some feedback from you as well. Now, Jeremiah chapter 32, verse 9. And I bought the field of Hanamiel, mine uncle's son, that was in Anathoth, and weighed him the money, even 17 shekels of silver. So this money that allowed for the purchase of the field. Can you begin to see the picture that I'm offering? Without that money, they're not able to purchase the field, correct? They're not able to buy the field. And notice the 17, okay, pointing to the salvation of the body. 17 being salvation. And especially here in this context, 17 shekels of silver. Genesis 47, verses 15 and 16. Please bear with me. Let me see if I can get this to post. Up. Now I got to break down this verse. Hold on one second. I think too many colors here. All right, that should be on the field. Let me get the latter part of it. Okay, when money failed in the land of Egypt. Now just try to substitute the word money with what? Instead of the word money, just put the word or the name Christ, and you might begin to see what I'm offering. So when money failed in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came unto Joseph, and Joseph again is a type of Christ, and said, "Give us bread. Why should we die in thy presence? For the money faileth." Joseph said, "Give your cattle. I will give you for your cattle if money fail." If Christ fails, if salvation fails, then there is redemption. Joseph is able to provide the cattle. He's able to provide the bread. That is also Christ. Genesis 42:25, Joseph commanded to fill their sacks with money, with corn, and to restore every man's money into his sack. Can you see the language of salvation there? Restoring every man's money. That's why I'm offering that money is a synonym for Christ, right? And I didn't see it like that before. I thought, before when we think of money, we're thinking especially the Antichrist, Babylon, coming with their own riches, and that's true too. What I'm trying to do here is I'll see if I can transition from money being a type of Christ or pointing to the blood of Christ on the judgment, mammon. Yeah, right, exactly, Eric. On the judgment side, it is the mammon of unrighteousness. So we can see again how money is pointing to both Christ and Babylon at the same time, given the proper context. So to restore every man's money is really to bring back the captivity of the elect. That is salvation, right? Exodus 22:7, if a man shall deliver unto his neighbor money or stuff, again, I think that's pointing to the gospel, and it be stolen, where who's going to steal the money? Excuse me. Who is going to steal the money? The thief. Who is the thief? Babylon, right? Antichrist. If the thief be found, let him pay double. Exodus 30, verse 16. Hold on one second. And take the atonement money. The atonement money. Now, I mentioned earlier that it's not really money that's in view. It is the blood of Christ. It is the blood of Christ that is able to redeem. It's like having a commodity that you can use in order to purchase something. Can you see that? So it is the blood of Christ, I believe, that God is referring to as money, and that's why that would be pointing to Christ. So take the atonement money of the children of Israel and shall appoint it for the service of the tabernacle of the congregation. Now take a look at Matthew 25, verse 18. Wait a minute. I don't think I need this verse right now. I think I have it somewhere else. Matthew 25:18. I don't want to get ahead of myself here. Bear with me one second. Matthew 25:18. Where is it? All right, I'll have to come back to that. I don't want to post this verse twice. Let's look at 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 20. Oops. The love of money. Yeah. I think I have that verse too, Eric. We'll come to that. All right. 1 Corinthians 6:20. For ye are bought with a price. There's the money. That's what I'm offering here. And it may not be readily seen. Okay, again, let's try and keep our minds on the gospel. The focus is the blood of Christ. Ye are bought with a price. Ye are bought with the blood of Christ. Can you see that? Therefore, glorify God in your body and in your spirit. So the money is really the blood of Christ. Now, let's try and take it one step further and look at the gift of God. That's the price of the gospel. That is the money. Even though it is money, it is the gospel, we are commanded not to sell it, but to freely give it. It's a free gift. It is the gift of salvation. Can you see that? Christ is the price. Yeah. He is the money. He is the price. It is the blood of Christ that provides redemption. However, we're not to merchandise the gospel. Rather, we have to freely give the gospel. Yeah, to give of himself. Isaiah 55 verse 1. O everyone that thirsteth, come ye to the waters, and he that hath no money, no Christ, come ye buy and eat. Yea, come buy wine and milk without money and without price. Now, there seemed to be a little bit of a paradox here, but there really isn't. If you think about it, Christ is the money. He is the gospel. It is his blood that provides redemption. And yet we are to come and buy without money. We're not to bring our own money, right? And without price. Why? Because freely ye have received, freely give. Ye are bought with a price. That's the price of the blood of Christ. However, it is a gift of God. It is freely given unto his people. Now bear with me. Matthew chapter 10 verse 8. Exactly. Ye are bought with Christ. That's the money. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out devils. Freely ye have received, freely give. So that's the principle I think we see there in the Bible. It is the gift of God. 2 Corinthians 11 verse 7. Because I have preached to you the gospel of God freely. It is a very expensive gospel, isn't it? It's very expensive. If you had to buy it with your own money, can you afford it? It is the blood of Christ, the precious blood of Christ. So Christ is the money. His blood made it possible for God to atone for the sins of his people. Okay, now Exodus 21:11. And if he do not these three unto her, then shall she go out free without money. We're not looking at the whole context here. I just want to highlight some verses and hopefully try to find the common thread, the common denominator on the salvation side here. To go out free without money. Now again, keep in mind that money is Christ, but it is a free gift. We're not paying for it. That makes sense? And I think in this context, the money there, it's not the money that is anti-Christ. So we're not to bring our own money. And I think we'll see that in the verses that follow pretty soon. Acts chapter 8, verse 20. But Peter said unto him, Thy money perish with thee, because thou hast thought that the gift of God, you see the contrast there? That the gift of God may be purchased with money. Harp, hi, welcome to the room. Mr. Happy. All right, Isaiah 52, verse 3. For thus saith the Lord, ye have sold yourselves for naught, and ye shall be redeemed without money. Now, the word without, I don't think is in this context. So it was a little hard. It still is trying to determine the whether this verse is talking about salvation or judgment. Ye shall be redeemed without money. I think it's more on the salvation side, to be redeemed without money. Why? Because it is a free gift. Come by without money, without price. Remember that? Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8. For by grace ye are saved through faith, that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God. Can you begin to see how these verses now, at least to me, they seem to be making more sense when we look at the gift of God. By grace ye are saved. So it doesn't cost you anything. Job. Now here's another interesting verse. And again, if I can get some feedback from you, we might be able to fit it into the, or at least have, see whether or not this is speaking of judgment or salvation. I think the context here of Job, looking at the other language, it's pointing to the church, perhaps in tribulation. I have eaten the fruits, if I have eaten the fruits thereof without money, or have caused the owners thereof to lose their life. That seems to be a type of the church in tribulation, the falling away of the church. Without money, without Christ. Can you see why it's important, Lord willing, to see that Christ is the money, the blood of Christ? It is a free gift. However, given the right context, we see how it relates back to Him. All right, let's look at another category. We'll come back to the money aspect of it here again. Look at buying and selling, merchandising the gospel. Now, I think for the most part, we'll see that this is speaking of the church, more so in judgment and tribulation, as I mentioned before, that they merchandise the gospel. Revelation 13:17, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So to buy and sell is to merchandise the gospel. It is to share the gospel, right? So even though one is buying and selling, when it comes to salvation, when it comes to Christ, when it comes to money, it is a gift of God. Matthew 25, verse 9. But ye wise answered, saying, not so, lest there be not enough for us, but go ye rather to them that sell and buy for yourselves. Again, merchandising the gospel, those that are sharing the gospel, buying and selling. Can you see why I began to say that this is, I think it's a challenging area, because there are a couple of different aspects of money that we have to try and consider. Ezekiel 7, verse 12. The time is come, the day draweth near, let not the buyer rejoice, nor the seller mourn. So again, I think God is emphasizing that those who buy and sell, that's the church. It is the corporate body, the body of Christ, right? But here, judgment is coming on the church, on Babylon. Let not the buyer rejoice, nor the seller mourn. Buy the truth. Now here's an interesting verse. Buy the truth. Well, why? How can we buy the truth? God said earlier that freely have received, freely give. Buy the truth. Buy without money. Can you see that? Sell it not. In other words, we have to freely give. So again, a bit of a challenge when it comes to looking at some of these verses, I think. Buy the truth. Well, who is the truth? It is Christ. right? Christ is the truth. So how are we to buy the truth? Well, we buy without money, because salvation is a gift of God. John chapter 2 verse 15. He drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep and oxen, and poured out the changers' money, and overthrew the tables. Can anyone tell me what this is speaking of? What's in view here spiritually? When Christ drove out the money changers. And I think in another verse or another passage, yeah, exactly. He drove out Babylon. Matter of fact, he said, make not my father's house a house of merchandise. Where the gospel is, there's an exchange, because the command is, freely ye have received, freely give. The command is to buy without money. And here you have these money changers typifying the unsaved church, that is Babylon. They are merchandising the gospel, and Christ overturned their tables. The language of judgment, correct? John chapter 2 verse 14, along the same line here. Those that sold oxen, and he found them in a temple, and sheep and doves, and the changers of money sitting. Changers of money. Now, again, think of money as Christ. So money then becomes synonymous with the gospel, correct? The changers of money, those who handle money, they handle the gospel, they handle Christ. Can you see that? All right, now let's take a small little detour, still along the same line here. Look at interest, because that too is related to money. The two sides to interest. We'll look at the unrighteous gain first of all. The judgment side, Psalm 15 verse 5. He that putteth not out his money. Can you see Christ there again? He that putteth not out his money to usury, nor taketh reward against the innocent, he that doeth these things shall never be moved. So to take out money to usury, in the context of obtaining gain, unrighteous gain, that is the language of judgment. Now, Leviticus 25 verse 36, take thou no usury of him or increase, but fear thy God. So there's the command again. Do not put your money out to gain interest, to gain usury, unrighteous gain, but fear thy God, that thy brother may live with thee. Proverbs 28 verse 8, he that buy usury and unjust gain. There it is. Unjust gain. So God is defining the word usury. It is unjust gain, and it has to do, I believe, with sharing a false gospel, coming in the name of Antichrist. Unjust gain increaseth his substance. Now we can see why God now begins to talk, or begins to speak of the rich men. Okay, the rich men, that's Babylon, the church. He shall gather it for him that will pity the poor. Eric writes, usury and unjust gain equals Babel. Yes. Amen. I believe that's correct. And then Ezekiel 22 verse 12. Bear with me. And thee have they taken gifts to shed blood. Can you see the killing of the body? Taken gifts to shed blood. Thou hast taken usury and increased, and that thou hast greedily gained of thy neighbors by extortion. So there it is. Unrighteous gain, usury, interest, unjust money that is Christ. So can you see again the link here? What I'm offering is that, first of all, Christ is the money. And it is freely, he is freely given to the elect, to his body. And then you have those that are coming, they're looking for unrighteous gain. They're looking to multiply this money, and they're not giving it freely. They're looking to make a profit. So they're not sharing the truth of the gospel. Can you see that? Now, on the other side, there is a salvation side, I believe, to interest. Let me post that. We're looking at Matthew 25, verse 20. And this is all looking at the parable. Here's verse 20. And so he that received 5 talents. Remember that parable when God is reckoning with the servants, those that had received 2 talents, 3 talents, 5 talents, and they gained beside them 5 talents more. In this verse, I have gained beside them 5 talents. Well, it's not by their own effort, of course. The number 5 pointing to salvation. So in other words, by being faithful to the Word of God, by being faithful to the command, they have allowed for the body to multiply, because God was saving the 144,000, saving the elect. So they gained 5 talents more. And verse 22, I have gained 2 other talents. That's another servant. I have gained 2 other talents beside them. Now look at the language, and this might begin to shed some light on some areas of this parable that I was a little bit not too sure about. Looking at the hard man, the austere man, remember that? We began to talk about that some time ago. In verse 23, his Lord said unto him, well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. So can you see now the increase, the usury here, the gain that is in view is salvation. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Verse 24. I knew thee that thou art a hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, gathering where thou hast not strawed. Now, I'm still looking into this verse, so I'm not going to comment on it much, except to look at the overall context and how the money aspect or the usury aspect of it comes into play, right? And in verse 25, I was afraid and went and hid thy talent. Now comparing this servant to those who multiplied the talent, they gained 2 more talents, 5 more talents. This man went out and hid the talent in the earth. What is the earth? It is symbolic of the church. So here's Babylon now coming with a different gospel, a different price, a different money. He is coming with his own money. Verse 26, his Lord answered and said unto him, thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knewest that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not strawed. Oops, hold on one second. All right, let me post that again. I think I accidentally deleted it. His Lord answered and said unto him, thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knowest that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not strawed. Eric writes, that would be Babylon sowing and gathering. That's possible, Eric. Like I said, this is a challenging parable, and that aspect of it, how Christ is saying that thou knowest that I was a hard man. We'll have to follow up on that, Lord willing. Yeah, and I know I began to mention that the last time, but we still need to spend some time looking into it. But here, considering the wicked servant And now notice in verse 27, Matthew 25, thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received mine own with usury. Now, because of the context, because of the verses that I posted earlier, this has to be the language of salvation. Before I was thinking, well, maybe he was going along with them, and then we're looking at Antichrist, the church now. God is agreeing with Babylon. That's why I said, let's hold off on that and then hopefully come back to it. But this verse here, given the other verses where the other servants were commended for multiplying the talents, and this man went and hid the talent in the earth, and now Christ is saying, well, I should have received mine own with usury. So, in other words, the same way he complimented the other servants, this servant also, had he done the same, he would have been exalted, right? And the word usury here is the Greek word, or the Greek Strong's reference 5110, and it's mostly focusing on bringing forth. And that's not surprising, because that's what happens with the talents. The other servants, they multiply the talents, whereas Christ now is condoning the servant for not putting the money to good use so that it would multiply. Any questions there? All right, now let's look at some of the verses we're familiar with. The love of money, the riches. Well, money, if money is Christ, it's just amazing how, beautifully God has put these verses together, and only God could do that. The riches, the money is Christ. Christ is the ultimate riches. But now we have those who come with their own gospel. They come with their own Christ. They come with their own money. And they're trusting in that. They're trusting in their gospel. And now they become rich, not rich towards God, but rich, exactly, yeah, thanks for pointing that out. That's precisely the case, because I mentioned earlier also that the money in view is the blood of Christ. So in other words, they're coming with their own sacrifice. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, money equals blood. They're coming with their own sacrifice, and they are rich in that sacrifice. And therefore, that's how we can relate to the rich man. 1 Timothy 6:10, for the love of money. It's not really the money that's in view. Money, there's nothing wrong with money, because money is Christ. But the love of money, love not the world. Remember that? Love not the world, or the things that are in the world. The love of money is the root of all evil. Evil is Babylon, Antichrist. Which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith. You see that? To err from the faith is the falling away. Hey, Miss T.S., welcome. To err from the faith is the falling away of the church, and relating to the love of money. Ezekiel 28 verse 4, with thy wisdom, talking about Tyrus in this context, with thy wisdom and with thine understanding, thou hast gotten thee riches, and hast gotten gold and silver into thy treasures. Gold, silver, ordinarily, like money, would point to Christ, would point to the elect. But in judgment, it is Babylon that is coming with the gold, the silver. Babylon is coming with its own money, its own sacrifice, its own blood. But Abraham said, son, remember thou in thy lifetime, that's the rich man and Lazarus, in thy lifetime receivest thy good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things. But now he is comforted, the believers. They're coming out of Babylon. They are redeemed. Christ is revealed to them. and thou art tormented. You are allowed, or you are subject to Antichrist. So you perish in your own gospel. Luke 12, verse 21. So is he that layeth up treasure for himself, and is not rich. Again, there's nothing wrong with riches. Why? Because Christ, ultimately, he is the treasure. He is the riches. He is the money. So he that layeth up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. Isaiah 55 verse 2. Wherefore do ye spend money for that which is not bread? Well, again, Christ is the money. There's nothing wrong with spending money, except God commands that this is to be given freely. We're not to merchandise the gospel. Wherefore do ye spend money for that which is not bread? Christ is the bread, but in this context it would have to be Antichrist, right? Those that are coming with their own bread. 7 women shall take hold of one man, saying, we will eat our own bread and wear our own apparel. Remember that verse? Only let us be called by thy name. Mark 12 verse 44. All they did cast in of their abundance, their riches. But she of her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living. Now here's the poor widow woman compared to the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the rich men. They cast of their abundance, that is their own blood, their own sacrifice, their own gospel, their own money. Mark 12:41. Jesus sat over against the treasury and beheld now the people cast money into the treasury, and many that were rich cast in much. So, when the Bible speaks of the rich men, the chief captains, and so on, given the context, it's usually pointing to Babylon, as far as I can see. We're still looking at Christ being the sacrifice, the money, the riches that is in view. But in judgment, it becomes Antichrist. The rich men, they're coming with their own riches, their own gospel. They say unto him, Caesar's. Then saith he unto them, render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's. Now, can you see how this verse might begin to make more sense now if we understand that God is making a distinction between the money that is Christ and the money that is Babylon, typified here by Caesar. I think Caesar here in this context is pointing against to the church. It's pointing again to the church, right? Anyone disagree with that? So render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God. We are orphans. Lamentations chapter 5, verses 3 and 4. An interesting verse. Looking at the suffering or the tribulation of the elect in tribulation. Our mothers are as widows. We have drunken our water for money. That reminds me, I think, of a verse regarding Esau, who sold his birthright for a bowl of soup, right? Yeah, so the same principle, I think, is in view here. The idea of drinking the water for money, and that's why the wrath of God now is on the church. Our wood is sold unto us. So money, nothing wrong with money, because it does typify the blood of Christ. We just have to be careful not to come with our own sacrifice. All right, and finally, let's. I want to look at this area because I think it's really interesting. the field of blood. And we'll try to look at the duality behind these verses, judgment and salvation. Acts chapter 1 verse 18. Now this man, we're looking at Judas, who betrayed Christ and typifying the church, betraying Christ in tribulation. Now this man purchased a field with the reward of iniquity, and falling headlong he burst asunder in the midst, and all his bowels gushed out. Now, Judas committed suicide after betraying Christ. That's what happens to the church, I believe. The church kills the church commits suicide. Every man's sword is against his brother. Verse 3, Matthew 27. Then Judas, which had betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned, repented himself and brought again 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders. The number 3, that talking about purpose? Or is the number 3 in this context looking at judgment? And the silver, what do you suppose the silver is really relating to? It is money, right? It is money. Now, he betrayed Christ with money. Isn't that interesting? The church betrays Christ with money. Judgment. Yeah, the number 3. Matthew 27 verse 4. Now, bear with me. Again, I mentioned this is not this is a challenging area, I think. And it's also beautiful, Lord willing, once we begin to see the gospel and try to tie that into the rest of the Bible. Matthew 27 verse 4, saying, I have sinned in that I have betrayed the innocent blood. So he confessed that he betrayed Christ. And in verse 5, he cast down the pieces of silver, notice here, in the temple. Isn't that interesting? In the temple being the house of God. Where was Christ betrayed? In the temple. It is the church that betrayed Christ, typified by Judas, and departed and went and hanged themselves. So there it is again. He committed suicide. Notice in verse 6, the temple, the house, the kingdom. Yes. Amen. And the chief priest took the silver pieces and said, it is not lawful to put them into the treasury, because it is the price of blood. It is the price of blood. That's true. Now, notice here in these verses, we see the judgment aspect of it. First of all, the church betrayed Christ. Remember, I've also offered in the past that it is because of the judgment that came on Christ that gave God the I'm trying to think of the verse that I offered the last time, that it cannot be redeemed, or how does that go? But by the blood that sheddeth. Let me see if I can find that verse. For the land, help me out here if you can think of the verse that I'm talking about. Let's see. Oh yeah, Numbers 35, chapter 35, verse 33. So ye shall not pollute the land wherein ye are, for blood it defileth the land, and the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed. Let me post that verse, because I think there's a direct tie in there, Lord willing. That is what happened to Adam and Eve. Yes. Amen, Eric. Now notice here that for blood it defileth the land, and the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed therein, but by the blood of him that shed it. So as God is bringing judgment on Babylon, that allows him also to provide the redemption for the body. The blood that is shed there is the blood of Babylon. I believe that's in view. The land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed therein, but by the blood of him that shed it. So when God sheds blood, the blood of Babylon, he is therefore cleansing the land. Can you see that? And that's what I believe is also in view in this account here in Matthew 27. And they took counsel and bought. Now notice what they did with the money. The money that was used to betray Christ, what happened to it? They took counsel and bought with them the potter's field to bury strangers in. And I mentioned earlier, what does burial have to do with spiritually? Salvation. Strangers, believers are strangers and pilgrims. And this, I think, it is the language of salvation. It is the price of blood, the price of money that betrayed Christ, and that is also redeeming the body. The potter's field. Wherefore that field was called the field of blood unto this day. And finally, verse 9. Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him that was valued, whom they of the children of Israel did value. 30 pieces of silver, the number 3 there. Again, judgment and salvation. The money that betrayed Christ is the money used to buy the potter's field to bury strangers. Can you see that? So either way, it's all about Christ, the blood of Christ, the redemptive power of money. All right, let me post a conclusion, and then we'll open for discussion. Hopefully I might be able to post the whole thing. Alright, there it is. The Bible appears to be associating money with the redemption power, the redemptive power of the blood of Christ. His blood is said to be the money that paid the ransom for the elect. And although there is a price tag on it, remember, ye are bought with a price, it is said to be given freely. However, in judgment, the church, that's Babylon, began to trust in her own redemptive power, her own money, her own riches, her own sacrifice, her false gospels. They merchandise the money, they merchandise the gospel, rather than offering it freely. Isn't that interesting? All right, any questions? Bear with me 1 second.